Hey, Dylan.
Hey, Mike.
Dylan, have I told you about the Technology Cooperative?
Yeah?
Well, I'm gonna do it again.
Okay.
No, I'm gonna real quick cap on that. Technology Cooperative, because we've talked about it.
You can't rewrite the ad in the middle of the ad.
Well, I'm not gonna talk a lot about the Technology Cooperative at the front, because we've talked about it a lot in the last several episodes. Non-profit, located in Knoxville, STEM, outreach, helping children, access to technology, a bunch of other cool stuff happens there. Last week I was talking about the game coding project that I was in the middle of when we recorded the podcast. And I did wrap that up. Well, at least I wrapped up that weekend. That weekend ended, and I have a playable game. Tentatively, I was calling it Space Wars. I gotta change that name, because that name's already been taken on Xbox Live Indie Games. The one place I did not check. I checked trademarks, but I didn't check Xbox Live Indie Games. So I think Swarm. I don't know why. I don't know.
I think that's a game.
That's not. I've checked.
Okay.
Trademark searched.
Did you
Anyway.
check Xbox Live Indie?
I've already reserved it.
Okay.
So that's the thing. I didn't. Normally I reserve games before I talk about them, and I didn't do that with Space Wars, but I don't think it was taken from under me. I think it was taken a while ago. Anyway, did that coding for charity project. We raised $400. Now I'm leaving it open to the end of the month. So I just go to decide, just leave that open, run to the end of the month, so you can still donate to the Technology Cooperative, participate by backing my chip-in, GameMarx.com, I'm sorry, GameMarx.chipin.com, or if you're on the live stream right now at Twitch TV /Vinyl, you can donate there as well. The widget's going to stay on there through December. Well, we'll just count the whole month of December as a fundraising effort for the Technology Cooperative. So maybe we can hit that goal of 1,000. Right now it stopped at 400, which was amazing. I mean, the people that backed, thank you everyone that backed. All of this money, 100% goes straight to the Technology Cooperative and keeping that running and keeping the programs running. There's no paid workers at the Technology Cooperative. Everybody is a volunteer, so that is going to direct costs in this charity, not any administrative overhead. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. We'd like to be big enough to have administrative overhead, but we don't now, so all your dollars are going directly to help. If you kick that in before tomorrow night, you will be entered in the Win a Raspberry Pi contest. So I don't know when you listen to this podcast, but if you listen to it in time and you kick it in, that will get you an entry into winning a Raspberry Pi that we're going to raffle off tomorrow night. We're going to have a little bit of a fundraiser game night. So if you're local in the Knoxville area and you listen to this, and it's not past Saturday, Saturday 7 p.m., you can come down to Technology Cooperative, check out the space, but just hang out in kind of a analog board game, room that you would have at a con. Just kind of a very free and open. Just hang out for a while, and check out the 3D printer. 3D printer is pretty cool. We'll probably get that up and running and just have some print going off on that, just to check it out. So the Technology Cooperative, you can learn more about that at techco.org, and if you want to donate, you can do it right there from techco.org, and if you want to pitch into the chip-in, it doesn't hurt it either way. 100% of the funds, either way, are going to the Techco. You can go to GameMarx.chipin.com and back that project. And I will live stream some more code dev as I have time. Holidays are getting crazy, so it's not going to be this weekend, but I will just kind of announce on Twitter and fire up the stream as I work more on the game Swarm. Thank you again to everybody who contributes and everybody who checks us out.
GameMarx.
Welcome to GameMarx, the podcast for Xbox Live indie games and development. GameMarx, where gamers control the means of production.
Alright everyone, welcome to the show. Public service announcement. This is actually a podcast.
What?
Okay.
You do not have to make the live recording. Just every now and then we get a little creep, somebody's like, oh, I can't ever make it the time you record, if you record a little,
okay.
We do in fact record the podcast. It's not just a live stream. It's not just a live event. It's beyond, the television broadcast now. It's even beyond DVR. You don't have to remember to set your DVR to record GameMarx.
I was going to say, Twitch TV should be showing that. Like, I'm not sure how you would find this podcast.
Twitch TV archives it. Yes, you can watch the archives there.
Yeah.
They archived all of my weekend gaming stream. So it's like a 9-hour video in one stretch that they have uninterrupted.
Maybe they just want to be in the chat or something like that.
Of course, you can participate live, but you also send us an email at podcast@gamemarx.com. We tend to actually address those more on the air more frequently than chat. And that's directly a reflection on how on-topic chat can manage to stay. Sorry, guys.
There's a reason why he does not let me, aside from the fact that I broke the computer, read the chat.
Oh. So this week, before diving into news, I want to talk a little bit about Swarm. And more specifically, Swarm being the new name of Space Wars, the asteroid game. For those of you, or just to refresh everyone, the concept here is an asteroid game that is multiplayer, having many, many multiplayer ships on the screen at once, potentially. Kind of a massive asteroid chaos battle, but you are also somehow mining or collecting resources from the asteroids and from the wrecked ships that go into your resource point total that you can then spend those resources on upgrades for your ship, and that is a persistence. It is a Call of Duty prestige system meets asteroids meets multiplayer. Real simple idea that I'm executing on, nothing too complicated. I guess this is overall how that went. I did put a video up on the Funkworks channel of the progress. So I just made a little quick 7-minute walkthrough video. Got up the basic gameplay mechanics were up and running, moving ships around, asteroids on the screen, score being totaled, lives implemented. And then did get up network connection. And then refine that a bit, and then also got in some artwork, which will probably be the final artwork. I think where that ended up, it's like, yeah, that's good. I think I like it, where it went. The artwork is the artwork from the Indie Graphics Builder. I think that's what that was called. IGB? Yeah, that sounds right. Indie Graphics Builder, Kickstarter that we talked about, and I backed for $75 when it was a Kickstarter, and so we got a whole bunch of, I won't say random, but miscellaneous and various pieces, and, some of it looks good, some of it doesn't. I think some of the RPG stuff kind of looks amateur. It sounds meaner than I mean it, but it's simplistic. It's not...
Some of it looks sloppy.
Yeah, it's not detailed, is really what the issue is, right? It's not shaded. It's not... it's smooth textures instead of, having some interesting bits of the texture done on the RPG art. But on some of the other areas, like the space assets and things like that, it looks amazing. The stuff looks great. The background and the drops and the astral stuff. So that allowed me to put together some nice parallaxing layers real quick and go in there and touch that stuff up to make it work for the game. So basically, I took some really high-res, high-detailed planet models that they had created, planet sprites, and Gaussian blurred the shit out of them so that they would look proper for parallaxing and not distract, and then I dimmed them out and just kind of washed out the colors a little bit. But I think that's a mark of me learning more about graphics and what looks good in a game versus what looks good as static art. Like if I... 3 years ago, Mike would have taken that beautiful detailed planet texture and put it in the background. And it would have been too busy for the player to be able to focus. If you go back and look at Inca Blocks, I think the YouTube video is still up at Inca Blocks. I think Inca Blocks is still in the Xbox Indies database. So you can still go to xboxindies.com and look that up. You play the video and you look at that background was insane.
Well, but the problem you run into with that is you have this really nice art asset and you want to show it off instead of looking at kind of the whole picture.
Right.
It's the reason people tend to overuse lens flares and gradients and stuff like that. They're looking at, the pieces instead of the whole.
And that's why I'm saying that it's like it's a mark of becoming more professional, less amateur. When you step back and you go, yeah, it is a really great piece of art, and it is wonderful back there. Now, Gaussian blur the shit out of that and fade it down so it doesn't distract from the point of the game.
Yeah.
Which AdBlock, I mean, is a case in detracting from the point of the game. I don't know. I'll admit, I have thought about re-releasing AdBlocks.
Why?
On XBLIG?
Yes. Not like as AdBlocks 2. Like, we still have the project. I could still publish it again, and it would appear, and it wouldn't be on the new releases list, and so it would just appear again. It'd be back.
Would it benefit from any of the existing ratings, or would those be cleared out?
I don't know at this point. Like, I don't know if it would let us, if you did that and it's been dark that long, but even if it did pop up, it would slide down really quick.
Yeah, I think so.
But yeah, that is kind of interesting because
it would be nice to have there as a portfolio piece, so you could actually say, no, look at this game.
I mean, to go back,
as opposed to, well, we had this game, but let us explain why it's not there.
It's not there anymore.
Yeah.
Well, the releasing would also go back and like completely rethink the experience.
Yeah.
Leave the core gameplay there, but all the stuff around it that was a pain, and that where we had reviewers who missed that they could add an AI.
Yeah.
And just sit down and like reapply thought to it and go, okay, we don't want the tutorial popping up in your face and this wall of text on how to play is ridiculous, and how could we overcome those? But then I think, why would we do that?
Yeah, I mean
it's still
benefit of doing that. Even if it was presented as perfectly as possible, it's just this really simple board game, and it's not in the right market for that.
No, and yeah, it's just like there's so many other games we're not doing. It's like we should just leave it alone.
But it'd be easy to change the background and tweak a few little things.
I don't know. See, that's where I started thinking about it, and I was just like, yeah, that's the amateur mistake. Thinking that, like, I've done the core gameplay, now I'll just slap the menus and stuff on it, and then you realize, like, that's more work. The polish is more work than the game. And it's like, all I'm talking about doing is taking the polish coat off and redoing the polish coat, and it's like, wait a minute. No, we know better. That is not a simple task. That is a...
Well, and it becomes a slippery slope because you've got this series of very simple tasks, and it's like, well, we're just going to do this one thing. Well, then we could do these other list of things. Where do you stop? How do you prioritize?
Now that I've done this, that looks bad.
Yeah. Because, like the issue we had with the thumbsticks being reversed, in my mind that says, we'll add like a configuration option, but that's, like it starts spiraling out of control as a project.
It's a whole other menu and the default settings, and
It's like if we were doing this from scratch, yes, that is like a point that we need to learn from, but now...
But anyway, back on track.
Yeah.
So then I got the graphics done and some basic multiplayer. So kind of what I would have talked about is multiplayer. So that was the unknown going into the weekend. And I hadn't touched it Friday night when we recorded. So Saturday I got up and it's like, we're going to learn multiplayer. I got the basics up and connected back and forth pretty quickly, and once again, where's the book? Is the book over by you? No, I put it back on the shelf.
I don't know what book you're looking for.
He's looking for his Bible book.
Oh, crap. I grabbed the Korean one. Oh, well. I grabbed the Korean version.
Yeah, and still.
But, sorry to use the other part of it. The orange book, the Chad Carter Coolness, book has a great chapter in the end here on I'm reading the Korean version now, but toward the end of the book here somewhere these are shaders, so camera projection. You know what, the book doesn't... Interesting. Maybe the Korean book did not get everything in it the American book did. Maybe that's why it's thinner. The chapters did not go high enough. Yeah, so here we go. The last chapters, 27, 28, 29, they deal with, even chapter 26. Quite a bit of the book, chapter 25. Quite a bit of the ending of the book is dedicated, a good chunk there, is dedicated to network play. I did talk a little with Chad, over the weekend. And, he said, yeah, put a lot of effort into that book and he doesn't think anyone reads it or anyone, is concerned. And it's unfortunate because it really covers all the topics well. So, yes, the book is XNA Game Studio 3.0. Nothing of the networking changed. Not much change between 3.0, 3.1 and 4.0. That this book is irrelevant.
Even where it did change, I think in most cases it wasn't so much conceptual as just like API.
Yeah, it was just like we renamed this, we put this method in with this class, it makes more sense there. And there's several guides online that when you say, hey, I can't find that, you just like look up, what can you not find? Here it is now. I think the biggest thing that bit us in 3 to 4.0 was that in 3, calling sprite batch begin multiple times was not a performance degradation, such to the level that it is in 4. In 4, it is a huge performance hit to call that multiple times. So when we did XNA, when we did AdBlocks as open source, that's one of the things that I fixed for the 4.0 code and adjusted that. So I read through there. I got connected fairly easily. The problem was figuring out the Microsoft bullshit of what account I can run in what place to make the connection work. So if I signed in as me on, so the first mistake that I made was that I went for a network game. I went for an Xbox Live game. Right. Xbox Live networking, not System Link. Okay? Because I was like, nobody fucking System Links. Have you ever used 2 Xbox and done a System Link?
Not the 3... Well, no, probably the 3... No, actually, no. Not the 360.
So you did at some point have a LAN party of Xboxes?
The original Xbox.
Okay? Yeah, that's about as common as I think System Linking actually is.
Is the code very similar? Or is it completely... I think it is.
I think it is identical.
Okay.
Except for the fact of performance and lag and packet loss. There's a lot less on a LAN than there is across the internet.
Right.
But, the matchmaking system, all of that seems... It's just a flag when you create the session. What kind of session are you creating? And you have 3 options, actually. And I can't remember what the third option is. But you have System Link and Live. And I forget what the third networking option is in there.
Yeah.
But no, I just went in and was like, hey, I just want a live connection. So it's like to make an Xbox Live connection, you have to be signed in with like a gold account. And I'm like, okay, well, I signed in on the gold on the Xbox with my name, but then when I launched the PC one, Windows for Live launches, and it's like you got to log in with a gold account, and I try to log in with the gold account, and it's like, no, well, we logged you out on the Xbox. So I'm like, how the fuck do I test this?
You have to have a second gold account.
Well, I'm not gonna fucking go get a second gold account.
Right.
That's asinine. So I then I was like, well, maybe I don't need, like, I'm trying to read a matrix in here that Chad has in the book, and, I'm kind of skipping through it a little bit, but I guess I didn't quite read it right. I'm like, oh, okay, wait a minute, no. I can have a silver PC account, right, connect to or you only have to have a silver account, but I think it was for a System Link. I think I read the wrong column.
Yeah.
So then, I was like, okay, so on the PC, I created, for the Xbox. I was like, oh, I only need silver. Okay. So on the Xbox, I created, GameMarxing, because somebody fucking took GameMarx.
Well, we don't know when that happened. I mean...
There is nothing on that profile except like one game played ever.
What was the game?
Fuck, I forgot now. Like I
Interesting,
dug it up. I dug up the link to the profile of the user, you know, and not enough for the information was like to know who did it, but yeah. So GameMarx was taken by this unused account. They're not playing shit. So I got GameMarxing, just to play on Giant Bombing, because I think somebody took the Giant Bomb account.
Right.
So, like, they have Giant Bombing. Or actually, I think Giant Bomb is Jeff's personal account or something. Or he wanted it as his personal account, so they made another one for the studio. So, I get that, and basically, that does not work either. Like, so, having the Giant Bombing account on PC or on,
360. Well, it wouldn't work on 360 because you don't have Creators Club.
Yeah, so it didn't have Creators Club, so it kicked out the 360. So I thought, like, okay, well, I'll launch Creators Club as me, but when the game says sign in, I'll sign in as GameMarxing, right? That didn't work. I then, you know, I should have gone back. I think what I misread was a column in Chad's book, but I'm online. I'm trying to read the MSDN articles. This is all fucked up. Like, none of this is explaining this shit. You know, and it would be nice just to have a thing that says, hey, this is why Chad in his book has this whole grid table. You know, because it's really screwed up how hard it is to connect two systems together, not because of the networking code, but because of the bullshit in Microsoft's profiles. But what ended up I having to do is I had to go to System Link. Okay, I read more in Chad's book, and basically it's like, you have to go to System Link, and when you have a System Link account, you can simulate packet loss and simulate lag. And that's how you develop the online multiplayer game, not by actually using the internet live connection, but using System Link. And then you have to run your account, your Creators Club enabled gold account on the Xbox, and you have to run a local profile account of Windows Games for Windows Live on there. Then it became a whole nightmare of how the fuck do you create a local account? And to create the local account, when you get to the I agree, okay? So you go in there and it's like, hey, you gotta log in. It's like, use the existing account, create a new account. And then you come up with the whole EOULA of like creating the Windows Live account, I agree. You have to scroll to the very bottom of that, and then there's some blue highlighted link text that says, I would like to make a local account instead. If you click the big next buttons, you know, you automatically go online to make a Microsoft Xbox account.
Right.
And there's never a prompt for make a local account.
Seems weird that that account wouldn't also work as a local account.
Yeah, you can just use it in a offline mode or something, but no. And if you take it online, then, because it's silver, as soon as it tries to network in any capacity, it goes, no, you can't do that. Okay. Because you're silver and you're blocked. And it's like, if you make a local account, then you can connect. So that was half of Saturday.
But that seems weird that you couldn't create a silver account that would also... Is this on the PC or on the Xbox?
On the PC.
Okay. That I guess that makes a little more sense.
Yeah, again, Chad's book has a wonderful chart that breaks out, okay, what's your connection type, what's the PC, what's the Xbox, or what's Xbox to Xbox allowed, what's required on each, you know, whether you need Creators Club, whether you need gold, you know, and on that, and it's just, I think I misread the System Link column as an internet column that led me down this path, and unfortunately the MSDN documentation doesn't talk about any of this that I could find, so that wasn't helpful rolling out the problem. So eventually I got this to work, okay, and I could connect between the two, and the networking code to connect between the two was very, very simple. I mean, they really just give you a packet stream that you write packets to, and there's a stream that you read packets from. And the XNA framework does quite a number of things that I was impressed by, as far as when you read from a stream, you read from not like just a generic stream, but you read from a gamer stream. So each Xbox that's coming in is tagged to a gamer, and essentially you loop through an array of all the connected gamers, And then for each one of those gamers, you read any packets off their stream.
So
you don't even have to segregate out the stream of like, this came from Hugh, this came from this guy.
So there's no chance of basically two people writing to the same stream and, crossing the wires.
So the packets, when they're received, are sorted by X and A into buckets.
For each gamer.
For each gamer.
Okay. So, because I thought it was just like, I kept imagining a raw stream like, writing or reading from a content reader in the content pipeline.
Right. It is like that when you read the stream. They give you a reader and a writer. The reader and the writer is basically a binary serializer.
Right.
That has some nice overloads that will read a float. Read a vector 2, a vector 3. So it won't do like rectangles, but you shouldn't send a rectangle. A rectangle has a lot more data than you probably need. Right? You probably only need the XY coordinate in a rectangle. You don't need the height and width of the sprite, right? You probably know that on both ends by knowing what it is. So that was really easy to get up and running. And you just make sure that you read things in the order that you wrote them in, and you're done. It's just like the content reader and writer in the pipeline. If you've dealt with that, if you dealt with any kind of like reading from a serial or a raw socket connection, it's going to feel easier than that because the framework is handling a lot of the minutiae details. The other thing I thought was cool is that each one of those gamers, when you have that gamer object that you're, then saying like read from their stream, they have a tag property. So you can create up a class and assign it to a tag property that contains the additional data that you would have to look up each time when you say, oh, it's this gamer ID. Well, now I need to reference him in the master list. The initial packets that I'm sending across are the ship positions, and then I'm having one guy act as a server. The server is sending out the asteroid positions.
Right. So
only one game is calculating the asteroid positions. The rest of the games are just getting their positions from the server. So, that's the easy part. But what's the tricky part in networking protocol is that you have to account for lag, and you have to account for drop packets. You can't rely on LAN level connections if you're going to go across the internet. I read online that the certification process, all Xbox games are tested at a up to a 400 millisecond ping time and a 20% packet loss, I think. Or it could be 210 is the certification level. So 200 millisecond lag and 10% packet loss. But they test up to 20% and 400. Basically, if your code is good and you run at a 400 millisecond lag and 20% packet loss, if these are the values you push into the XNA framework for simulation, and your game still plays pretty okay, like, it's okay at that level. That is extreme lag at that level for there to be some kind of, ghost lagging and people running into walls.
Yeah, it's not going to be perfect.
Not going to be perfect. But if it is still, like, you're running and you're playable, basically people are just going to like, hey, I'm going to get a better server at that point. Then you're really golden. But you should definitely run at 210. So 200 millisecond lag and 10% packet loss. I set up with our console system. I set up, the ability to change those values on the fly. So I could, jump in there and add more lag or take lag away, add lag to one client but not the other. So then it became time to go down the path of how do you handle lag and packet loss, okay? And I kind of spent some time Googling and researching before I just kind of dived in with assumptions that, and I did have assumptions on how you do that. I wish I would have read more into Chad's book, but I found the network prediction sample. So if you go into the education catalog on the Xbox developer site, XNA developer site, the Create MSDN Hub, and you look for the network prediction sample, this sample basically shows you how to handle packet loss and lag. And you do this really by, the one way that I assumed, is by prediction. So if, simple prediction is if the enemy ship, if the remote player's ship is moving, at this vector, so this is his speed and this is his position on this vector, then I can assume he's going to keep doing that until I hear otherwise. And that way, I don't need a packet every frame. And you can cut down greatly on your bandwidth requirements. One thing that games are monitored on is an 8K per second bandwidth allocation. That's it. Your Call of Duty, 8K per second. That's all Microsoft allows AAA titles to use. So it's a very, very skinny, light protocol. I mean, you 8K per second, I wouldn't even load a web page at that,
Yeah.
Like, that is crazy low. But I have been working to make sure, like, I keep, keep very slim. And, one way to slim that down greatly is not send a packet 60 frames a second.
So you have a timer that says, okay, now I can send a packet again.
Basically, you said, like, a simple example, like in the predictive networking example, it has a counter in there and basically says, like, hey, I'm going to send a packet every 4 frames. And then it basically ticks off every time it's called and say, no, I'm not called, no, I'm not called. Now, I didn't do mine frame-based. I did mine time-based, so I have a time in there. But I have a time in there for sending the asteroids, and I have a time in there for sending the players. So every 300 milliseconds, I send the asteroid positions. But asteroids don't change their velocity, right? Once they have their vector, they're locked in, man. They're rocks in space. I don't have to worry about it.
So you can basically all you're doing is periodically syncing to make sure that
just periodically syncing just to make sure we haven't wildly gone off the rails, just as a safety measure. But I slow that way down, and then I send the ships. I think I was sending those every other frame, just to create a really smooth animation. So the ships were going at 30 frames a second, and that was still probably a lot. And it still probably needs to be toned down about once every 4 frames. But even at that, sending 50 asteroids and then sending the ships every frame, I think I was sending, the server was sending 6K up, and the clients were sending 2K up. So that meant everybody else was downloading 2K, or downloading 6K if you weren't the server, and, it was just the opposite. So predictive is one thing. So predictive is simply just saying, hey, I know you're here, and I've got your vector and your velocity that came over in the packet, and we're just going to continue to assume you're moving in this direction until we hear otherwise. And then, of course, what I do is when I get the network packet in, is like assume like, oh, well, now this is a known state. So whatever the prediction had you in, screw that. You're here. So the way I handled it in my game is all the local stuff, a prediction runs first, and then the networking ran second. So then the networking
basically
said,
overrides.
do I have any incoming packet? Yeah, and then overwrote the predictive. Now, what you have to measure for the predictive to work, you not only need to know, here's the ship, here's where it's moving, but when you get that packet, that's not where that player's ship is, that's where that ship was at the time that packet was sent.
Right.
So you need to know how long it took that packet to reach you. Unfortunately, this is pretty much an unknowable on the internet. Okay? So there's things we know, and there's things we know we don't know, and then there's things we don't know that we don't know. Alright? This is in the known...
unknown.
This is the known unknown box. We know we cannot know true distance time to send a packet. Okay?
Right.
The internet just does not work like that. So we have to approximate it the best we can.
Because a ping is just measuring the send and then the response.
Right.
It's not measuring the actual time.
So you send a ping. So this is where you start with. And the XNA framework, again, this is one of the things that's going to suck about losing the XNA framework, right? The XNA framework has built into those networking objects per gamer a ping time. It's just accessible. I don't think it's not checked every frame, right? It's probably refreshed on a lower, cycle.
But it's good enough.
But
it's a guess.
You're not gonna ping for every frame. You couldn't ping for every frame, because it's gonna take longer than a frame to get it back. So, you have this ping time, right? So you can divide the ping time by 2, roughly assume upload and download bandwidth are equal, which is a crazy assumption because that's never true.
Well, but I imagine it's like so many other things in XNA that you're running on such small margins. Like, it's happening so often, it's close enough.
Exactly. And again, you're down to 8K per second.
Yeah.
Right? That you're trying to stay within its 8K per second bound. So, it's not like my Comcast line here is like 5 megs down and 2 megs up. Like 8K per second, you're fucking fine. You're well within fine tolerance of that spec. So you can divide that by 2. And that will get you the ping, we'll call it the latency.
Right.
But it is not the lag. Because we'll call lag to be the individual spikes and troughs in a networking protocol. Because even though you have this average ping time going, that doesn't mean that this packet came in the average ping time.
If it suddenly spikes, then it's off.
This may be a fast packet, or this may be a slow packet compared to the rest of them, okay? And therefore, you could have a ship that's like jumping forward and going back and all that because it's not consistent. So this is where some really cool shit got into it. And I spent a lot of time staring at the network predictive sample before this clicked for me and made sense. And again, I should have read the Orange Book. I should have read Chad Carter's book because his entire chapter on handling the predictive algorithm is the fucking example in the catalog. Like, identical. Okay? In fact, I told him, I'm like, okay, who came first here? Sean Hargraves and this example, or your code? And Chris told me, it's like, yeah, all the networking stuff came through Sean. Sean helped me write all that stuff. So it's very clear to see why it's the same setup and the same process. We're talking about like classes named the same thing and stuff. So it's really great because it's a really annotated version of, now there's a lot of comments in that sample, but I mean, here's like a book on it as well.
It's walking you through it.
And it's walking you through it and it's helping, oh, I know why we don't have viewers. Yeah, GA Tech just talked about VGAs are on.
Oh.
But Walking Dead won VGA Game of the Year.
Woohoo!
So, that's one that's on my list. So, just to do a playthrough, and stream all of it. But, okay. So here's, like, the holy shit that's really cool part. To measure the lag. So again, we're calling latency just the average round trip ping time. We're calling lag the individual spikes between, this packet and the expected average. What you do is you pick a time on your system, a fixed point in time, like say the game launch. It's an easy one in XNA to get because you have total elapsed time. So you have elapsed time, right, which is the frame time, but you also have on game time total elapsed time, which is the time that has elapsed since the game started. Basically, you need a date and time, just fix it. Bam. Boom, here's my date. Got it. And with every packet, you send a delta between that fixed time and now. Right? So I've been running 2,000 seconds. I've been running 2005 seconds. I've been running 2010 seconds. You send that to the other client. Now the client...
And everyone's going to have every client is basically going to have the same 0. I mean, it's not going to be the same value.
There's no way to synchronize clocks.
Well, what I mean is they're all going to start.
Let me go through this, Dylan, because you're where I'm at. Because you're like, you can't synchronize a clock. How is that even fucking useful? It's not clicking for me how that is even useful. So I pick on, alright, so you got your time. Your arbitrary time that you picked, and you send me how much time has lapsed since that arbitrary fixed point. And then I calculate an arbitrary fixed point and how much time has lapsed. And when I get your delta in, I figure out my delta. You've been running 2,000 seconds. I've been running for 500 seconds. We have a delta of our deltas of 1,500 seconds. Here's where the cool shit kicks in. The delta of the deltas is a constant. So when you've been running 2,000, you've been running 3,000 seconds. I should have been running for, what did I say, 1,500 the first time? I should have been running for 1,500 seconds, right? At that point. So then my delta of your delta should still be 1,500 seconds.
And if it's not, you can adjust up and down.
And you keep a rolling average, because this stuff can greatly change over time.
Right.
Right? So you keep a rolling average of the last 100 deltas as like this baseline delta. And then when you send in your packet, and I calculate my packet delta, and let's say this one came out not to be 1,500, but 1,510 milliseconds. I take that off the average, and I know this packet was 10 milliseconds slower than what I'm used to. Okay? And I add that to half the ping time, and say, if the ping time is 400 milliseconds, the half the ping time is 200 milliseconds, but this position of your ship was 210 milliseconds ago.
So basically, let me see if I get this. If every client knows when it starts the game,
correct,
and every client knows when it first connected to every other client.
Nope.
Or not? Okay.
No, that's irrelevant.
Well, okay. So every client knows when it starts the game, then it can basically use that as a baseline to figure out when in time that packet actually came in.
Right.
On their time.
Yeah, well, sort of. We can measure the lag. So we're measuring the latency with our pings. We're measuring the lag with this date trick.
Well, I mean, the idea is, I know that I started at time X, and you started at time A, and, so your B is really, some value Y on my timeline.
Well,
and,
no. So,
okay. I'm at some other,
You start at X.
Yeah.
And now the time is Y.
Yeah.
You take Y minus X and send me the result.
Right.
D, delta. And then I take A when I started, and B, time now, and I manage the two, and I get a delta.
Right.
It's the differences in our deltas that should remain constant. Right? Okay? You following?
The delta represents the time between you starting and I...
No, the delta... My delta is the time that I've been running.
Okay.
Your delta is the time that you've been running.
Okay.
The differences between our deltas is constant.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're both going to advance one second
per second.
Yeah. So, right? So we have a constant advancement, right? So when the deltas get off, I know that packet took longer to arrive than the other packets have been going. Than my baseline average. Because the other thing is like, yes, I have to average them because they will go up and down, so I just keep that rolling average of the last 100.
Oh, man. Like, I think conceptually I get it, but the math required...
Harder, but implementation is easy.
Like, I would have to sit down and write... I would have to write down, like,
It's easy in implementation, but you look at that code and you go, I don't get it. How is the time that you started somehow helping me, and I'm picking the time that I started, and those are always going to be different. That's the time I launched the game, not the time you started the networking session, not the time, there's no attempt to synchronize anything. Okay. So it's really fucking cool. It is, it's one of those things like when you grok it, it's like, that, alright, I get it, that's cool, that's, time is a constant until you approach the speed of light. But that's another problem.
Yeah.
When our networking system, when you're on fiber and at the speed of light, then you may have additional, because truly time is not a constant. That's what we found out, right? We found out that the speed of light is constant. Time is relative to the speed of light. So as you approach the speed of light, time slows down. This is what makes it possible. If you had a powerful enough telescope to see far enough back toward the origin of the universe, right? The point from the Big Bang, which we're expanding, you would also be seeing back in time and could theoretically witness the Big Bang. That's another mind trip. Go read Neil deGrasse Tyson books or something if you want to go down that path. But be forewarned. Like, I read, like, some of that stuff and then just came away, like, questioning my understanding of, like, fundamental math now. Like, I don't know anymore. Yeah, so, okay. So, you've got this delta now, and you can use it to say, basically the end of this equation gives you a rough estimate that in my tests, I could jack up to a 400 millisecond and a 20% packet loss. And still have a pretty decent experience, with the ship. Now, with the remote ship showing the right location. Like, he was responding well to my turns. Of course, when I turned at that rate of a lag and that rate of a packet loss, right? Because now you may be 800 to 1600 milliseconds, 1200 milliseconds may go by between packets. A shit ton of time when you're also dropping 20% of your packets. Now the ship's popping all over the place. Now you're like, oh, no, he's not here. No, he's here. He's here. In the video that I demo, I say it's lag from updating the phone strength. That's actually something else going wrong. I have something when gamers connect and disconnect that's not cleaning up properly, that I need to debug on my side. Like, if you disconnect and reconnect once, it doesn't clean up properly. Disconnect and reconnect again, and it does. So, I'm not quite sure. Maybe the events aren't firing as I expect, or something like that. I have to dig into that deeper. I also had a couple other bug issues in that, I was sending... So, when you draw the pixels, right, those have to be ints. You have to draw rectangles on the screen.
Right.
They have to be integer values. So I was just calculating the ships off a vector for speed, and then rounding those to the ints, and then saving the location as a rectangle. Just saving myself a conversion step, right? So just moving the ints. The problem was when you send that packet across the wire, I'm sending 2 frames, 3 frame delay. I may have dropped 1 or 2, so it may be 6 frames old. So then introduced a rounding error. So what happened is on the player side, on the local side, every frame that got rounded to an int. Okay? And that value got added. The result of the round got added. But when it comes over, it says like, hey, I got 6 frames to calculate, and it rounds at the end, so that value no longer matches. So, what I did yesterday, I actually got a few moments. I converted all of the position-based stuff to floats. All of it to vector 2s. I think I've learned my lesson. No more storing positions as points or as, rectangles for ease of rendering. Just go ahead and have, like, a,
convert it at the time you're actually drawing. Like, at the time you need it to be.
At the time you need it, round it, but don't round it. Keep it as floats, in game state. So I did that for positions of everything. So that compounded what looked like lag was actually rounding issues and this disconnecting. But cleaning that up, and disconnect issues aside, it looks really well. The last piece of the puzzle that I'm not doing is smoothing the results. So you, instead of overriding the predicted state, you take the predicted state in, and then you take the
actual
state in, and then you calculate a new velocity in, and that's what you save, and basically turn and drift over
towards the
towards where it should be, not moving it any faster than it could per frame anyway, right? And so that way on the client end, it might look like he doubled back, or it might look like he did a weird snake move right there or something, but that was actually like lag, but now it just doesn't look like to the player he jumped.
Does that not, at that point, it almost seems like, and I guess this is an issue in general, But there, at that point, like, since you're not using the actual position, you're doing smoothing between that and the predicted. Isn't there not one true position at that point? Like,
the cake is a lie. The cake is a lie.
But
You're
I guess
never
it's
shooting at, even in Call of
the
Duty.
actual position. You're shooting at where. But I suppose it's just like the deltas that's good enough-ish for most,
Horseshoes.
Yeah, basically.
So, I think the high lag scenario,
Yeah.
most gamers won't play. If it just seems that bad. They'll stick to the better networking scenarios. So I think like a game like Call of Duty, the predictive algorithms aren't having to work as hard as, my extremes took it to. Like, for the most cases, not. But also, you can get better in your predictive algorithms, right? So, like, if a player is running to a wall, he's not going to run through the wall.
Right.
Right? The player's going to stop, and so you can use, other advanced predictive techniques to figure out which way the player might turn at the wall.
And we coded this so that the player will stick to the wall when they get to it.
Instead of going through it, you mean?
Yes. Instead of going through it or sliding on it, you will stick to it.
If the player is, like, running off an edge, running off a building or something, they're probably going to try to jump to the next building. You can just go ahead and assume a jump action at the end of the wall, and then in air, marry up the actual jump with the real jump. But, and then, too, if you think a lot at the speed at which these games are played, like the speed at which the players move around the screen, it won't be hard to write somebody in a few frames, Like, it will only take a frame or two, given that a lot of players are very jerky in their movements. So they run and they stop, they run and they stop, they run and they stop, and when they stop, that really gives you an opportunity to align and catch up. And so I haven't written any smoothing algorithm yet. That's the next thing. And I kind of got to think on how that's going to work.
So it seems like something you would have to do kind of case by case.
Yeah, I think it's based on your game, how you want to do it. I think, for a first-person shooter, you want to probably drift that player over, right? So he's still running in the same direction, but you're going to drift him over. But in my case, I think I can just go ahead and turn that ship.
If it would hit an asteroid.
No. I'm talking about, like, the ship is in one spot in reality, and in the other reality is in another spot, of picking a point to move the current ship. Instead of just jumping it to where it belongs, I can only move it so far in one frame.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to forecast it I'm going to basically extrapolate out and say, okay, if I have both of these ships can move this far in a frame, then in 3 frames, their vectors can intersect. And that will be the course of the ship until it gets to that vector, and then it will turn and go in the vector of the original one. So instead of looking like it drifted over, right, it slid to the side, like you might want to do a first-person shooter, it's going to look like it turned and then it turned again, right? It's going to look like a little S move that it did, which in my game would be a legit player move. That won't look unnatural, okay? In a first-person shooter, circle strafing is a legit move. So strafing would not look out of place in a first-person shooter, so that's what you would go with there. So, I mean, yeah, that's the crux of networking, I think. I think I can stand behind it not as hard as I think others have made it out to be seen. I see why it is a dragons beware, dragons live here area.
Yeah.
Because you have to be on top of everything, but I think us being the developers that we are coming to this, we can look at it and go, okay, yeah, well, it's just this. I got it. I got it down. It's just this. And
I think part of it, too, has to do with thinking ahead about it. Because you designed this to be a very simple game, so it's not going to have to be really chatty.
Right.
I think the problem you could run into is if you build out this concept and then, you wait too late to start thinking about networking, then you're like, well, to actually make this work the way it's supposed to, you have to exchange a lot of data, and
Correct.
then you're...
And that's going to come down. So what I think I'm going to do next is I'm going to go down the single player side.
Yeah.
And basically work on the ship upgrades and get the ship upgrade system working and the resource collecting methods working, and tweak out my collision detection and all of that with a background thought of I have to network this.
Yeah.
But then I want to kind of get to a point where I feel fairly stable on how all that is done before I go back to the networking protocol and say, okay, here's the packets I'm going to send. Because if I'm adding both, it's a lot of work.
Well, it sounds like what you would do is you have that syncing packet that hits the wire, every so often. But it seems like occasionally, like if you shot an asteroid, you want to put a packet on there immediately to say, hey, this asteroid was destroyed.
And that's the other thing that I want to do, too.
Kind of an event-driven.
I want to have an event-driven, like, okay, here is priority packets, player positions, shots fired, asteroids destroyed. That is important. Positions of asteroids, not so important.
Yeah. So that, when you're reading it in, you go, like you have your first bit be an ID for what type of packet it is, and then go, okay, well, it's
Correct.
this, so...
Yeah. And that's the kind of stuff, it's like I want to work out a little bit so I can get those enum values down, those bitwise flags down. So it's like, okay, it's going to be one of these types, so I'm only going to need, 4 bits to make this enum value work, because I'm working with 8K. 8K per frame, 8K per second, is what I'm working with. So, yeah, I get 1/60th of that per frame if I'm really doing that. And that 8K per frame, that's not all me. Like, some of that, there's overhead that the framework's adding and routing and addressing and all that stuff to make that other stuff work. So, part of it is already gone. Like, Chad has in the book, he has the equation basically breaking it down of, like, how much you have to work with and how quickly, you can run out of space if you're sending way too much data. And so, I mean, the other optimization that comes in besides predictive and smoothing is don't send data you don't need. Right? The asteroid vectors never change. We should not get out of state. Once we've realistically synced those, they should not change. In fact, they're kind of my test of lag. It's like, because the ship has a bunch of random input to it.
Yeah.
But in high lag, I should never see my asteroids jerk around the screen. If they jerk at all, I'm really out.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're syncing just as a sanity check, just in case.
Just in case, right.
But, and so you don't have to do it as often.
And the other thing is to do a hybrid client-server and peer-to-peer. Like, I'm playing around with that as well. Like, I might just say, I shot you goes peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to know that, update that immediately. Asteroid positions come from a server.
Well, in fact, you could... Well, maybe not. I was going to say, you could say, like, if one server is maintaining asteroid positions, then when you're syncing data, you could say, well, I know this ship is in this position, his screen is going to look like, is going to encompass these asteroids, only send those asteroids, everything else doesn't matter. Not the exact screen. You could probably do like what we did with Captain Dubstep and extend it out, Now,
and the other thing that I'm attempting to do is make sure the game state and the classes that represent data are ignorant of the network.
Okay.
Right? So that I could just come in and manipulate the values from the network packets, but that the game is always like, it's always calculating asteroid positions, even if they're getting overwritten by the network later, so that it's not tightly coupled. I don't want my networking code tightly coupled.
You could change this code from whatever source you wanted.
Right.
And you could add a console command to do it or something, I guess.
Yeah.
Even
if you want to go that far with it. All right. Well, that's a lot of that. News this week. So, just a forewarning, the next 15, 20 minutes are going to be women in games again. Because that came up a number of places. So I think what made a lot of this relevant this week is Anita Scarcesian. She gave a TED Talk at TEDx Women, basically on the harassment that she received, you know?
Yeah.
So part of what her work has become, okay? So, like, it didn't start out like, you know, this is my project. Her project started out simply as a way of like, hey, I'm gonna catalog the tropes used in video games. And, you know, as she describes it, just basically give you a language in which to discuss these issues, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, create, like, you know, she has gone through, now these are all well known in the movie industry. She's gone through and explained them all. But there are tropes, you know, like there is the token feminist trope, okay? Where there is one girl who is the feminist, loudly proclaimed, and has all these stereotypes that go with that in the movies, you know, and it's the token feminist, trope. And the problem, you know, she'll show in that one is many times that trope is introduced into a world that has no sexism. So, like, the example she gives there is like the Powerpuff Girls.
Right.
They have Femme Fatale, who is this feminist, and she tries to convince the girls, the Powerpuff Girls, they're being exploited and they're being used. The problem she points out with that is the Powerpuff Girls live in a world of no sexism. You know, and that's fine. They don't have to live in a world of repression. Like, she's not saying that everybody does. But now when they introduce the feminist, she's not needed. There's no problem she's solving, so she's the villain. And it's just this portrayal of the feminist as this whack-out job who is fighting a problem that doesn't exist.
Yeah,
right?
Although, when you talk about an example like that, and I may be getting off on a tangent here, it seems like you have to always zoom out and say, like, feminism, you know, like, any sort of repression, exploitation, whatever, it's case by case, it's different, but it's really the same impulses and motives and things that are driving it. So, you know, if you focus too much on the feminist aspect and on
no, because there's the larger context here.
Because I think that I've never seen that episode of Powerpuff Girls. And I'm thinking they could still be exploited. It just may not be a feminist thing.
But I mean, the girls aren't like that's the thing. There's no exploitation.
Right.
There's no sexist things happening to the Powerpuff Girls in any of the episodes. Right. And Femme Fatale is a villain.
Right.
Okay? And she is doing all these things to get back at men. So she's the angry token feminist here, hates men, you know, all that stuff. And the problem with that, and even in Powerpuff Girls, is this branding as feminist as this negative thing. Like, it continues this problem of saying, like, you know,
everything's fine.
Well, no. It's the problem where women will say things like, oh, I don't identify myself as a feminist. And it's like, there's so much wrong with that statement. It's like, okay, so you're not for equal rights then. You don't like voting. That's what you don't like that, right? You don't like, you know, being able to feel safe, you know, when you go out. Like, you don't feel like, you feel like you should be judged on how you dress. Like, is that what you're saying? But it's this branding that is out there that is pushed that all feminists are man-haters and, you know, it's something that the feminist movement lost. And if you follow a lot of we'll just call them true feminists for lack of a better phrase, you'll see that they'll talk about this, of like, you know, getting women to say that they are a feminist is a problem, you know? And it's a problem because we allowed the men to define feminism. They got in there and they spun it as like, oh, she's just a man-hater. That's why she's saying this. She just got upset because she didn't have this, you know? Or she's not sexy. She's ugly. She's the ugly girl. That's why she does all this, right? And that became the mainstream accepted definition. And that's where the movie trope arises now of the evil feminist, you know, and all of that. And then that's why it's bad in the Powerpuff Girls, because it's reinforcing that stereotype of like, girls see that, and it's like, oh yeah, you don't want to be the feminist because she's the villain.
Right. No, I see what you're saying there.
And the little girls turn into little entitled bitches in the episode, right? They start taking the mayor, like, why don't you get a man to save the town? Why do you always call the girl, that's what they start doing. I mean, it is cute, and it's a Powerpuff Girls, and I love the episode, and it's funny. But yes, there's a larger commentary of like, okay, the problem is that there's not the opposite shown, and that if that's all the media that my girls get growing up, then all of a sudden my girls are saying like, yeah, I'm not a feminist though. And it's like, I've lost that point. At that point, it's like, no, you want to be a feminist. I identify myself as a feminist. I support equal rights. I don't
know, that seems like such a problem across the board, because a lot of people are so quick to, I am not whatever the bad thing is. Like, this happens a lot in relationships.
But that's what I'm saying. By saying I am not the bad thing, you're already giving into the thing that feminism is bad.
Well, yeah, but I think, it's, I think the tangent I would go on is like, at that point you're allowing the argument to be taken into the realm of, definitions and words instead of issues, and it's, yeah.
So,
There's no easy answer.
I think, it needs to move back. Like, it needs to be like, no, I just, like, this is what I do, supporting equal rights. I'm out there, activist, saying, hey, we get these things. So she did this TED Talk. The TED Talk is a little rough to watch, because I think it's a combination of a lot of spotlights on her.
Yeah.
And that's uncomfortable, right? If you're not me and you don't lack that gene, like, the gene that makes everybody scared on stage. Like, I don't have that gene. That gene does not exist on me. I enjoy the stage. I love the stage.
I have it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was showing people, like, your early GameMarx show episodes and explaining to them, like, I built a teleprompter, to try to compensate. A camera, not actually a person or an audience. Not like at the TEDx Women Expo with an audience filled of women, who are out there as proclaimed feminists, you're
I would go on a murdering rampage if I was forced to do that.
But also, it's clear it is bothersome, right? Like, the level of attack, her having to stand up there and talk about the game that was made of her face to beat and abuse her, right? And her face becomes blackened and bloodied and that was the point of the game. You got points for doing it. For her to talk about how there were coordinated forum threads, she fell short of saying like NeoGAF or anything.
Yeah.
But that's where they happened, where they would say, she's here, guys. Let's go here and do this and attack this site and take it down. And then they come back and they post the videos and like, look, I photoshopped, this porn image into her. Here, look at me, how awesome I am, and cheered each other on, of like, just how vulgar and like way over the top it was, the backlash. Again, for something she hasn't said. On the assumption of what she's going to say, I do like Jim Sterling. I do like the Jimquisition. I think it's kind of cool the way he does that. I do fault him a little bit for not...
Wait, what is the Jim...
Jim Sterling does the Jimquisition on The Escapist.
Okay.
And Jim Sterling writes for The Escapist, and he has, the Angry Nerd Rant show, okay, on there. He does it with style, and, he does it to good effect, and for the most part, it's okay. It's like you're doing it well. You're doing it for a cause and a purpose, and you're not just being a dick and being mean, but you're doing it in an entertaining way, and it just so happens that your entertainment is a little rough, right?
Right.
So, he does that, and he does talk about her, in one of his episodes, but the thing that he levels the complaint against, so what I fault him a little bit is like, you should have dug into the issue a little bit more to see exactly what she was about and what she was talking about, but he didn't do that. But what he did rail against was the people who attacked her. Yeah. And it's like, you made her the very thing that you feared. You funded her Kickstarter 125% or whatever it wound up. Like, oh no,
right.
or 25,000% or whatever. she asked for a few $1,000s, got like a $40,000 or something like that, insane. So, you know, you did that. You made her on the news channel of all the talk shows. And worse, you presented the worst side as the average gamer, right? And then every time you go out there, you're making it worse. And if you would have just shut up and left it alone, no one would have ever known who she was. She would have got her project. She would have made her YouTube videos, and no one would have ever known that except the people who were interested, and it wouldn't have been a hot topic thing. But you consistently go out there and have to attack her on every front with the worst possible demeaning things, and you give her all the publicity she would have never gotten. And it comes from the people attacking her, trying to take it away from her.
Yeah, and
which is the truth. Which is the truth, you know?
And the fact is, she hasn't even finished the tropes versus women for video games. So it really seems like a non-issue. Like, let those get out, and then you can pick her point apart. At this point, it seems like...
Yeah, at this point, the only thing you can do is an ad hominem attack, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny. Even on a Kotaku article that was covering this, the immediate comment by one of the guys was like, she's so full of shit, everything she just says is a bunch of crap. She has no understanding of games, blah, blah, blah. And then, like, in the next paragraph, says, like, she hasn't even released anything. I don't know why we talk about her. And it's like, wait a minute. You just said she hasn't said anything, and yet in the lines above attacked her for her views.
Yeah. Well, okay, there's two big... Well, there's really three big issues here. One, yeah, she hasn't said anything, or she hasn't put this stuff out. And I completely lost my train of thought.
Well, we'll move on. We'll move on there.
Yeah.
The TEDx is interesting to watch, and she does end it with explaining that, you know, she couldn't focus on the things because there were coordinated attacks at taking down her servers, denying service, anything she put on, so she had to get people in, harden that. What was her hobby became her full-time job now to do that. But she also said, because of all these attacks, my hobby became my full-time job. My Kickstarter was funded to all of this. You know, I'm out here, and I have a really great example to talk about, you know, what has to happen and change in gaming. You know, so...
Yeah. Actually, I remember what I was going to say. Like, one, just because she's the focus of these attacks, neither makes her point right or wrong. So, you know, both her defense and, you know, obviously the attacks against her are
no, like the point
issue,
of her topic, and the reason I even backed it and was in it wasn't so much of like the feminist side.
It's the fact that it's being made, but
was like catalog the tropes of women in video games. Like someone who is pretty much an expert on the subject matter of women and tropes, okay?
Yeah.
And catalogs each trope on her site and says, this is what it is, and this is how it's represented, and this is the good, and this is the bad, and this is, you know, ways to not write that trope. As a game writer, I don't want to fall into tropes.
Right.
And if I have a list in front of me of, here are the danger zones, I can read through them and go, okay, good, I didn't make that character. Or...
you can shoot for one.
I can shoot for a trope. It is totally valid to take a trope. In fact, it's a really typical writing mechanic to take in the trope, to use that as a reference point, a touchstone for the gamer.
To subvert it.
And then subvert it. It's like, okay, I bring her in, let's use the evil feminist again. I bring in the evil feminist. You see her as the evil feminist. You know from, you know, it's a trope. I got it, she's the evil feminist. And then I change it up on you and show you like a different side or something, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute. This doesn't reconcile with what I thought she was. Now I have an interesting game.
Yeah, and actually, I think what would be interesting is once she gets the tropes and women done, since this is essentially what she's doing, is to turn this around and like start documenting what people on the internet do, like, you know.
Yeah,
and I think that's not even a feminist issue, and to present this as an issue of feminism gets a lot of hate, But I think this is it's a power issue. Like, you know, if you convinced all these not gamers necessarily, but
So there's a wild, on the power argument side.
yeah,
Have you heard of the book Sex at Dawn?
no. Well, wait.
It's kind of making the rounds. It's a analysis of the history of sex,
Yeah,
from like caveman era and all that. And basically like the whole power thing, like,
I'm talking about social status.
well,
not
no. So
necessarily.
this is where it all comes from. It all stems from like, so back in like the caveman eras, I even heard like chimneys fucked it up for everything, right? But so back in there, you know, like there was a cave, and there was just a big like whole family in a cave, and there was one room in the cave, and orgies, and no big deal. You want to hook up with him, her, you know, whatever. There's no big deal. It's societally accepted, okay?
Right.
And the book, The Sex at Dawn, shows how, like, in the animal kingdom and in us, you know, if you look at us as an animal, as an evolved animal, like, we match the animals that are promiscuous, and it doesn't matter, you hook up with anybody. And it's like, the women are multi-orgasmic, because they're meant to handle multiple partners, right? Like, we're, as men, held to an unfair standard, okay, in current society. Because we're expected to meet with the multi-orgasmic woman, and what we're really meant to do is just tag out. It's like, okay, good, I can break now and rest. I did my one thing, that's all I'm genetically programmed to do. I'm not supposed to have to keep going.
Wow, this is...
So where all this breaks down is, right, we learn to farm. This is the book at Sex at Dawn's, like, general premise.
Right.
We're hunter-gathering, and we learn to farm, we get these chimneys, so now we kind of have, like, private rooms, like we can have fire in other places, so we can, like, you know, go off to have fun time, and it kind of gets private, but we also learn to farm. And at the time when we learn to farm is when our population shoots up drastically, okay?
Right.
And now it becomes a control issue.
Right.
Now is when we start, like, instituting things and having governments and having control, because farm requires workers, requires a closed society, and you have to control the women to produce the babies and all that to raise on the farm. It's a book I want to put on my reading list because it's like, it's just wild, I think, to go out and look at this stuff and then start to extrapolate these kinds of things. It ties in, I know it's the sexual topic is one whole thing, but it does tie in with like the whole veganism thing too of like, okay, yeah, wait a minute. We were not meant to be eating these things. If you go back and you look at this, it's like, no, that's not how we evolved. That's not how we graded. And you can't expect the last 3,000 years evolution to have changed our bodies to the point where we can cope with the diet we have now.
Yeah.
Right? And
I mean, that's the whole argument about the diet we have now is it hits the fat, salt, sugar, you know, like the big things that were scarce and now they're not, so...
Right. And
you know,
we may at some point be okay with that, but it's like the time
Not
span is
now,
too short
yeah.
that we've given ourselves.
But I think,
Anyway.
as far as like a power thing, like, I think her response needs to, at least to the harassment, and I haven't paid attention to know what her response is, to take it out of the context of specifically feminism, because basically, if you convinced all these people, or you forced all these people not to attack women, they would pick some other target.
Well, no, her response has basically been to publicly document and shine a light
Yeah.
on it. Like, she's not going back to these people and having conversations with them or arguing with them
obviously
or
not.
engaging.
I don't think you can engage these people.
You can't. Like she said on her TEDx talk, because of what she does, she's used to a certain amount of bigotry and sexism. Usually, she says this in her TEDx talk, usually it involves jokes about a kitchen and a sandwich, right?
Yeah.
But these are death threats, praying that you get raped, you know, having her image brutalized as a game. Like, these are so far beyond the boys being boys and even the level of, like, I accept I'm on the internet, there's anonymity on the internet,
Yeah,
YouTube had
people are
comments go
terrible.
here, right? Like, it's terrible. Like, this is far unacceptable for that. And also, this isn't 13 and 14-year-old boys. This is grown men who should know better, you know? This isn't just, you know, like the segment of gaming is far worse than anything else. And so her response has basically been like, if you're going to continue to do it, I'm going to continue to highlight it. right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to delete the comments. I'm not going to ban you from the forums. I'm going to show everyone what's going on.
Now, I have heard some people talk about her and like, well, she's just playing the victim. And I think what's probably happening is she's highlighting this and it comes off as that, and you're never going to like, you're never going to reconcile the two things because the bad guys are always going to have their spin.
I did engage somebody on Twitter, and I've had this conversation with other people on that start saying, well, she's just using this to get popularity. Well, it's like, okay, in every other situation where somebody has a traumatic event that they share as a way of coping and helping other people cope with similar situations, we call them survivors.
Yeah.
Okay? Playing the victim card is a way of, like, changing that she's not a survivor, and it's a way of changing the language, which the language is important here. But also on that, I'm like, explain to me in a way that I could explain to my 12-year-old, 9-year-old, and 2-year-old daughters when you shut up and take it, and when it's a problem that you talk about it. When is the time to be silent and just accept that?
The internet is the internet.
The internet is the internet, and accept this abuse. And when is the abuse too far?
When is this is not acceptable?
When is this is not acceptable abuse?
But actually, explaining it to kids, actually, I think that's a good explanation. That makes me think of it. It's basically these people acting like kids. Like, you tell them they can't do something, they're just gonna, like, pitch a fit. So,
you know, and I got into somebody on Twitter, and
I think you could explain it pretty well.
I basically, on Twitter, I was surprised he seemed more logical, I guess, than some of the fringe.
Yeah.
I think he was just kind of jumping in and buying the line, she's a victim and she's exploiting and all this. And I was just telling her, like, when do I tell my 12-year-old daughter that death and rape threats are acceptable?
Yeah.
Like, how do you stop a bully? You tell someone. You tell someone you're being bullied.
Yeah.
How do you stop it when you're being bullied on the internet by large, you have to tell everyone.
Yeah, and the problem is you're not going to stop the internet. Like I said, if you cease to become a target, they will find a new target. You know.
They will, but I think at a certain level, like, when it becomes more known, the backlash will become bigger. And it actually is becoming bigger. There is a stronger, I think that's why, I got to get to some of these articles now. We got to move on.
Yeah, this could be.
But I think that's why these articles are coming. I think that's why the one reason why topic came on that. I think these directly tie to Anita and what she's doing. And, like, now other women are, like, coming forward and no, you know what? And you're right. Enough is enough. Like, I'm not accepting this anymore. So, I got a few articles by Penny Arcade, by Ben Kuchara. Oh, you know what? I'm just realizing the byline, they're not by Ben. That's why these were better articles. I was about to say, like, Ben's doing better, but he didn't write these. The article that I'm going to highlight, I'm just going to hit them quickly, and we'll move on. One is breaking down Tomb Raider. So the Tomb Raider, the very controversial, like, rape scene. And where Laura and young Laura, like the origin stories of Laura, is like they want her to be a survivor of a tragic accident, and that gives her the drive to become the woman or whatever that she's supposed to become. And there was a very big backlash when that was said, that was shown at E3, and then was followed up with, like, yeah, we want the gamer to feel like, they protect her and they rescue her or something. And then that was like, okay, because you're just surrounded by a bunch of dudes and you have no women in game development, there was no one on that team to tell you how bad that statement is going to sound when you say it out loud to a press room, and how often that clip is going to be repeated again and again.
Yeah.
Oh, you have a female protagonist? We must feel like you have to rescue her. Like, stop and think what you were saying.
That's just like when dudes said, well, she's female, so she can't wear pants, she has to wear a skirt.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you don't have any women on the team who feel comfortable enough to tell you,
you're
hey,
an idiot.
Don't say that. Think about that for a second. Let's say that a different way. Let's rephrase the sentence. So it caused a bunch of thing. Now that the scene is out, this article, Sophie Prell on the Penny Arcade Report, she took it to some, like abuse counselors and some other, like, movie critics who specialize in or have written a lot of comments on, like, you know, these kind of tensions in movies and things like that. And just showed them the scene and, like, so what is it? Is it nothing? Is it something? You know, what is it? The scene itself, she runs away. She gets caught by one of the guys on the island, and he, like, strokes her and looks at her and makes, like, a suggestive comment of, like, now that I've caught you, you know, I always, you know, get my way, or something like that. And there's, like, an implied, like, it could go, like, to a moment of rape, and then Laura Croft ended up killing him, you know, like, getting his gun and getting away from him.
I'm assuming the first time she's basically killed a person, and she's very young.
It's then,
so
like,
it's not just the rape; it's the
it's supposed to be the whole thing
killing
taken
a
in
man.
context.
Yeah.
My 2 cents on this. It's a good article and it's worth reading. My 2 cents on this is, like, the problem is that it's a mature concept.
Yeah.
It's a deep concept. There's some merit in that. There's some valid storytelling in this that can be done. It is done in other mediums. It is done in movies. It is done in books. Games should be allowed to go into these territories. I think the problem is that games have not yet earned the cultural respect, let's call it, to take that topic seriously. More to the point, EA and Lara Croft and Tomb Raider have not earned that level of respect. If this was a new IP, where they can deal with rape as a mature concept.
Incidentally, though, I think the fact that they brought this to, like you said, movie critics and counselors and stuff like that, that's actually pretty smart, because having this discussion...
Well, that's what the Penny Arcade did.
Yeah, well, that's
what I'm saying. The Penny
Arcade
report said, like, let's get some non-gamers to...
But I was going to say, like, going to gamers and journalists and the internet in general, like, you're not getting that expert opinion, so it's going to be all over the place. And,
and well, even the expert opinions kind of had, like, varied, and they didn't give, like, black and white, but, like,
But they're going to have a more nuanced...
The counselor who works with women, you know, who have been abused and raped, she did say, like, this would be a trigger warning, this would be... something that could trigger a relapse or issues in someone who'd been, you know, attacked. So it is bordering on the edge, but a lot of it is implied. One of the movie critics pointed out that it is actually as offensive to the men as it is to the women, because it's perpetuating this trope of, like, if you take a bunch of men and you put them on an island with a woman, they turn savage and will rape them. You know, like, they, fuck, lose all control, you know. And he's like, so, like, there's that stereotype as well, which isn't in conversation, but I thought, like, again, this is why I would like to have a book of tropes of, like, you're right, that is a bad assumption of, like, just because men are on an island doesn't mean they devolve into Lord of the Flies.
And the difficult thing is that it's so easy to reach those conclusions that it's hard to break out of the box and still have the same impact that you're... It's basically an easy way. It's kind of a shortcut.
This other article, Ben did write this, and this one I felt like... And there's a lot of comments the same way of, like, there were so many points he should have followed up on that he did not in this article, but it was basically like, hey, publishers were telling him from some questions that games with female heroes do not sell, which was news to me, because I was like, I thought Portal and Portal 2 sold damn well, but, you know, maybe.
Well, those may have been, like, statistically, you know,
but
outliers.
The other half of the story is, because publishers believe female leads don't sell, they don't give them the marketed budget of male games. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And unfortunately, Ben doesn't, like, dig down deeper at all these points where he's getting this information of, like, you know, where they did these study of all these games, and it's like only 63 games of the 250 to come out, I'm sorry, of the 1,000 or something to come out, had a female protagonist of any type, and only of those, like, 6 get the marketing budget, you know, over a certain threshold, and it's like, okay, what are those 6 games? You know, what are the 6 games that got the budget, you know? And how did they hold up? And did they get critical acclaim? Did they sell well? Did they, you know, it's like, there's too many points where he does not follow up on this article, unfortunately. But
it's just such a mess of cause and effect, because is it, there's a lot of money being pumped into this game from the outset, so do they veer away from a female protagonist, or do they already have a female protagonist and therefore,
yeah,
they don't get the money?
And again, because publishers are so heavily involved, the female protagonists do not even get written in, or they get changed early in the pitch meeting because they won't get funding to begin with.
Exactly. Yeah, does it start before the marketing budget even is an issue?
This was interesting. Official Xbox magazine ran a story to point out that Netflix is streamed more on the PS3 than the Xbox. Now, and basically the PlayStation blog and Netflix at the same time announced how the PlayStation was the #1 console for Netflix and all of that, and Sony was running the flags up on that. Now, they were very careful in their statement to like, oh, so you didn't count tablets or Rokus or PC or DVRs, to do that. But I think the comments really hit home on this of like, yeah, I don't pay for gold anymore. And now I can't watch Netflix. And gold is not worth it. There was just a lot of comments on this article of that.
Well, as the number of devices that support Netflix increase, then, yeah, why wouldn't you? You probably have another device that will do it, so why wouldn't you use that if you're going to drop gold? Anyway.
Yeah, it's not a reason to keep it around, and also it's like, I think it's highlighting that if Microsoft keeps a premium service on the next Xbox, they need to drastically revamp what that means. They cannot just say, hey, to get Netflix and Hulu, you have to pay, extra. That's not going to work.
Especially since you already have to pay for those services to stream them.
Here's something I thought was interesting, worthy to discuss. In Exile, doing Wasteland 2, they did that Kickstarter, has turned to the community for art assets. So essentially they're putting up like some example 3D scenes so that you could test your lighting and all that, and they're asking the community to put into the Unity marketplace models and characters and things for the Wasteland 2 game, and then in Exile will buy them off the market. They will pay them. They're like, okay, we like these, so they are going to buy them. And other people could buy them as well. Like, they'll be for sale in the marketplace.
I actually wonder if that, if depending on how people use it, if that actually increases the number of really good assets in the marketplace.
Yeah, it
ends up benefiting the community.
Like, how does this reflect on In Exile, though, with the Kickstarter that they did and raising all the money that they did for Wasteland 2 to now say, like, hey, we got to budget the art and outsource it and crowdsource it. So, guys, now that you back the game, please draw us a bunch of art.
If they're going to pay for it, it's not fundamentally different than hiring or contracting an artist.
It is a lot cheaper.
It is a lot cheaper. But, I don't know.
At the same time, it's a good opportunity for artists.
Yeah.
If you do the model that they put in Wasteland, that's a great resume bullet.
Yeah.
So, I thought it was an interesting choice. I'm linking to the Penny Arcade Ben Kuchera article on that, but just basically to reference the story. So, Andrew Mulholland, they did some multiplayer game, developer Hunted Cow, the game's Battle Dungeon, and they basically said that the pirates to paying customers were 10-1 on their game, and they shut it down.
What platform was it on?
iOS.
Okay. Wait, what? How? That seems surprising because...
surprisingly high, given that would basically need to be jailbroken games. Maybe. So, here's the other side, which I don't think the gaming press took to task enough on them, is they said they was okay on their single-player games, that there was such a high piracy rate. Again, I'm like, how are you getting that figure? You said Android, I might buy you, but 10-to-1 on your games for iOS? And they have to be jailbroken phones to do that?
My question at that point is there a possibility of false positives in your way of, in your method of figuring out?
Yeah, however you're figuring that out. But they said they didn't mind on their single-player games. But in a multiplayer game, you have a server to support and all that, and they can't support the pirates and the free play and plus it. But at that point, a little trigger went off, and I went, why do you let the pirates play on the server? That is a fundamental design flaw in your game.
If you can detect it,
and this is why I think that it's not jailbroken iPhones. Because they were saying, like, we can tell, like, the number of people who've bought it versus the number of people who are playing, that the numbers are out of whack. And it's like, so you're not tracking accounts, IDs, and validating those purchases every time they connect. Or you had some exploitable web service where I could go in, exploit your web service, and validate my ID as a purchased account, and then when I ran the game locally, because that's all over the internet for the free-to-play games. If they have a exploit where you can ping the service and tell the service, I just bought 50,000 gems. Then when you log back in your iOS client, now you have 50,000 gems. Because the web service didn't know the difference between the authenticated client and just some random web ping, and then also isn't on the back end verifying the purchase with iOS. It's basically like buy it in-app, and then the app send the okay up that, hey, the purchase went through. But, I mean, there's several ways to validate and handle that. And it's just like, I don't think you guys did the effort to do the authentication routines to make sure it was an authenticated purchase client.
Well, it's like, the PayPal API or the instant payment notification. It sends you a web request. Part of the tutorial, like part of the walkthrough is like, no, you send that back, and then,
right.
like...
We're going to send you the checkout happen.
Yeah.
But then you're going to make a behind-the-scenes call and double-check
that this actually came from our servers, yeah.
So, and I think I'm a little over the blaming piracy for the failure of your games. Piracy has been around forever. It is not a new thing. I think if we had real stats, and this is speculation, I think if we had real stats, it has not really increased or decreased dramatically. It has pretty much been a constant thing.
Well, I guess what you're saying is gaming has increased with, mobile gaming and stuff like that. The number of games
of piracy probably has not changed significantly on that. And
people
again,
are releasing more, people are consuming more, but people are pirating more in the same ratio. The rules apply
of if you are overcharging, you get pirated more than if you're offering a fair price. It's the iTunes model. It's like, yeah, we did Napster, then we could buy songs at 99 cents, and nobody pirates music anymore. I don't pirate music. I pay $10 a month to Audio. Done. You know? Like, there's no need for me to pirate. The paid solution is a fair price, and it's just as convenient as the pirated stuff.
Time and risk versus money.
Right. And, I have the money, I'm happy to pay it. But when the effort to pirate it is a lot less than the effort to play it legitimately, that's when you have a problem. When you go in and you have free-to-play games that you are making it hard to play your game, people are all over Googling the free-to-play game. So, I question the hunted cow statements here on that. I mean, it seems like that should have been something they could have authenticated against. They do have another article up. Sophie has a pretty good article on Penny Arcade up. I'm going to skip it for time purposes here. But Towns basically was like this beta that was released through Greenlight.
Yeah.
So it was green lighted, and then they uploaded the beta to Steam, and people started buying it, but it wasn't real clear that they were still in active beta. And the Steam page didn't highlight that, and pissed off a bunch of people. So it's really, how do you burn all your goodwill in a few weeks post? This is interesting. There is an AdBlock, right? AdBlock or AdBlock Plus for Android released, that if you pay for the AdBlock Plus, right, you buy it, it blocks ads not only in the browser, but in games as well.
That surprises me that you could do that.
Surprises me that you could do that, but also, because Android is known for, like, you can't sell on Android, you do free-to-play, and you monetize with ads, that's kind of the more thing. Like, that seems to be crippling. Like, the number of people who will jump on AdBlock and just block all these ads, and then there's no views or impressions. I gotta agree a lot with developers on this one of, like, it's kind of killing it. Now, AdBlock Plus is saying, like, hey, well, you know, if you're good with your ads, if you're not, you know, the annoying ads that everybody hates, then we will whitelist you and allow your ads to show. And it seems like that's going to piss people off, too. Because if I buy AdBlock Plus, and then the advertisers themselves can, like, get themselves whitelisted on AdBlock Plus, it's like, I didn't buy you to let some ads through and not others. I bought you to block them all.
Yeah, and I guess you could say that's the price of, you know, getting the feature. I won't block all the ads, but it'll be good enough. It'll block the really annoying ones. But even then, it seems like someone less scrupulous could come along and do the same thing, and, you know, this is not a fix for the problem.
No. So, yeah, I mean, that's going to be crazy. I would hope that Google would move to do something like that, like blocking ads inside of other apps, you know?
And just ban it? Well, I mean, as much as you can ban
sandbox that off. Like, my network stream is my network stream, man. Like, other apps shouldn't be able to, like, manipulate my network stream.
But then you get into weird cases. I wonder if that would affect things like Juice Defender and, you know, other things that play with the network, like network-wide settings. Because I would have to imagine that how they're doing the ad blocking is just like, oh, you made a call to this site? Well,
I think that's most of the way the AdBlock Plus works, right?
Yeah.
But also, like, I don't know what level of entry into the app they'll be able to get to know, like, oh, here's something that pops up from the bottom and goes away, you know, and we can stop that. It's a pop-up. Steam, big picture's out. So, they also fucking did it right, and now there's a new icon. So the game control icon is 50% filled in if it works with the game controller, and 100% filled in if it will launch, install, and play without ever needing the keyboard. So you have to be able to install the game from your Steam library 100% on the controller to get that full mark in there. And of course, because they're Steam, then they launched a sale with all the games that had all the full marks on them.
Yep.
And girls can't know this yet because it's partly... I've been buying games for Christmas for them, you know, just saving up Steam codes as the sales hit. But I picked up a Left 4 Dead 2 4-pack. And it's one of the games, of course, because it's Valve, that support 100%. All right. The Castle Crashers dev, I also picked up a 4-pack of it on Steam, and it is also a 100% game. Anytime there's like a 4-pack of a multiplayer game,
he'll get it.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a great, like, you know, the girls can play that multiplayer game together. But they gave a lot of props to Microsoft for the current indie revolution, like the current place indies have in the marketplace. Because Microsoft did the whole digital distribution and XBLA and things like that. And, you know, I think, yeah, they're... As hard as we are on them, there has to be some credit given of, like, yeah, these titles once it got successful, once some of these indies started enjoying major success, I think, then it changed and it became a place for the publishers to play, and the indies kind of came downplayed on the Xbox.
That's pretty much the way with any system, though.
Yeah.
Like, it starts out, then it kind of
I think a lot of
accumulates
credit
all
has
this
to be given to
cruft
Steam,
and
too, though.
becomes closed. Yeah.
Steam needs to get a lot of credit for this as well. But, you know, overall, it's a good article, and, you know, giving some credit, you know, that it's a good counterpoint to, like, Super Meat Boy and Braid's experiences of just being these awful, horrid things to work with, and Fez, you know. And then you have Castle Crashers, where everything kind of went right, and it launched our studio, and it's awesome, and we love it. But of course, Castle Crashers is now on Steam as well for sale, and still way too much price now on XBLA. Like, basically, for the price of Castle Crashers on XBLA, one copy, I got 4 copies on Steam. Alright, leave Peter Molyneux alone, basically. There is an active backlash by the gaming press on Peter Molyneux, right? There is a lot of people attacking, the articles written are all attacking Project Gatos as, why are you going to Kickstarter when you have all these millions of dollars? You shouldn't need that funding. Like, that's the story they're running on Kickstarter, which is like, Tim Schafer is doing kind of well too.
Yeah.
Like, also, a lot of his own money is in that studio. And then, it's this whole article, and the other articles that brought out was, somebody said that Project Gatos was the last game he's gonna make. And he was like, no. And, you know, it's like, it's mincing of words on both sides. I will say a little bit on both sides. It's adding words to things they didn't say, but at the same time, there was some things implied that you should have cleared up statements that you made.
Yeah.
So the whole statement of, like, we're going to make 22 games and then a big game, you know, kind of implied, and then Peter never makes a game again. And then Peter's like, no, I'll make game, like, I'll be involved in games and, you know, to continue doing that. It's just that, you know, I'm gonna, you know, do all these things, and then, you know, this thing. And I think they were couching it too of like, no, that was in the context of like multiplayer games, of like, I don't think beyond that point I want to do any more multiplayer games. Like, this next one coming, the reason I have these experiments is multiplayer, but I'd rather just do these single player experiences like I used to do, on that. So that was a lot of the article. He was on the Yogcast today. So the Yogcast did, a live stream, and they had Peter Molyneux on there, and that was pretty good. Like, go to Twitch TV and hit the Yogcast and watch the archive hour of Peter Molyneux. It was pretty hilarious. They basically had Molyneux play, old Molyneux games, like, Magic Carpet and Populous and things like that. It was hilarious because, one of the Yogcast guys did not know, like, Peter, like, opened up this icon. I think he was half joking. And he was like, what is this? You know, he clicks on this icon and it shows a C prompt. And he's like, what do you think's going to happen when I click OK? You know, and he did not know it was going to exit the game. It was going to take you back to the DOS prompt, right? And it's funny because he got him to, like, what would you wager on your answer? You know? And he wagered one of those Jaffe bars or whatever that the Yogcast guys are always talking about. Jaffe cakes or whatever. And lost. You know, and lost to Peter Molyneux. And then Peter Molyneux was like holding that Jaffe cake like the entire, you know, thing, like, this is mine now. And like, I won this. You lost, that. So, that was pretty good. It was pretty good banter back and forth. They filled time while they tried to get games to run in DOSBox and had some glitches issues with, like, the Yogcast had come up with, like, Peter Molyneux, type suggestions. But then it's funny because then Peter Molyneux, like, took it with them and then, like, started grilling them into, like, you know, it's a game. Like, what do you do then? You know, and they were like, they were just coming up with, like, the wild, concept, but not like thinking of through like how it would be a game mechanic. And so like one of the things he said was like a Dota game, but it's plants that battle each other, and you play as the sun, right? And then so it's like they got the spirit of the Peter Molyneux account, but then Peter Molyneux's sitting there and he's going, okay, so what do you do as the sun? It's like, well, what are the mechanics? You know, you can make the plants grow. Okay, so...
He's taking it too literally.
No, he's like forcing them to like, okay, if we make this game now, like, what do you do? You know, oh, well, you shine it on them. So you don't shine it on your enemies and you shine it on your plants. Oh, but you can make them grow too much. And then he's like, you might have to make it rain on them. So he's like, oh, wait a minute, are you playing the sun or like the weather? And then they're like, oh, well, your friend plays the cloud and you play the sun. And then Peter was like, I kind of like this game now. Like, you know, but the Yogcast guys were like, I'm going to be honest, I am literally making this up right now. You know? Another one they have that I thought was a cute idea is like, you play a jelly bean, and you must figure out what flavor you are, but you cannot be eaten. So you don't know what flavor you are, and you could like look in the mirror and do like puzzle quests and all that. And they also had one too where you were an animal, and your goal was to get eaten by other animals, and then you would take them over. You would kind of like possess them, like so. You start as a mouse, and then like when the cat eats a mouse or the tiger catches something, catches an antelope, then you become the tiger, and now you move up the food chain. So you want to move up the food chain, but yet the game is over if you're killed by man, right? There's a big societal comment thing and all of that, and then it was like, yeah, that one's kind of interesting too. You know, you can play on that ideas. So it was interesting to like sit there and have them spout that kind of stuff off. And Peter, like, play into it. Not like, oh, haha, I get that. Like, no. So, you know, how does this work? How does, the, you know, the mechanics of this, what is the player experience? You know, like, what is it that you do in the game? You know, I thought it was a very good question to ask. You know, like, you come up with this big idea. Okay, so what does the player do?
Well, I mean, it's brainstorming.
Yeah, it was.
You know, it's a good brainstorming technique. Like, only a very small fraction of those are actually going to be usable.
Right.
But you may actually come up with something different. It was comical examples,
but you could tell the technique in which Peter employed was
He's like, I can make this work.
Yeah, we can design a game out of this. I will take you through the same conversations that I would have my game designers go through that work for me at 22 Cans or any of my studios to do that. So they also played a little Dungeon Keeper. Kickstarter. So there was a game that had a $50,000 goal, Alpha Colony. We talked about Alpha Colony before. It was the Mule clone. They had to cancel the first one, I think, to get licensing rights. So they stopped the first Kickstarter, and then they relicensed it. There's going to be a port of Mule and updated and everything called Alpha Colony. And $50,000, they fell $28 short.
Oh,
wow.
Kickstarter said tough shit. Right? No exceptions. It's proved that a lot of people don't understand how Kickstarter works. Because a lot of them were like, how can they not contribute $28 to their game? And things like that. And it's like, well, for one, I don't think you could do that with your own account legally. You'd probably have to set up something. But two, they probably did, and they also talked about that. But here's the bitter irony. I told you that this is their second attempt at it, right? Their first attempt, they asked for something insane. They asked for, say, $200,000 or $200,000, $250,000.
Yeah, this time,
do you know how much they asked for this time? This time they asked for $50,000. I'm sorry. Do you know how much they got last time?
No.
$150,000. If they just would have got the backing they had the first time, they would have met their $50,000 goal, and now they fell $28 short. I think in this case, though, Kickstarter's kind of dicks on that. Because the number of cancels and stuff that's not going to go through, like, that's going to be a wash. I don't know. It's almost like there should be an email going out to the developer saying, like, hey, you're within less than 0.5% of your goal. And extend your Kickstarter by 12 hours. You have 12 more hours to get that 0.5%. You know? Like that is just such a... And they even say themselves, like, this never happens. We have the data. Nobody ever falls short on the finish line.
Yeah. Well, I kind of wonder.
So the making the exception, nobody ever falls this short. It's like it's truly going to be like, okay, yeah, if you get this close, if you get over 99%, we can invoke a 99% rule here, and do something special, and handle it on a case-by-case basis. You've said so yourself from the stats. It's not that many cases to handle.
Yeah. But I wonder also what the stats are on people who fail a Kickstarter and then relaunch another one with the same or similar project. Because I want to think that...
I'm building those stats.
Okay. Because I was going to say, I want to think that that's going to decrease. Just, you're kind of picking up a negative stigma.
I want to...
Like, no one wants
do
to...
the success rate of relaunched projects. Now, it's going to be hard to do that. We might have to go through and manually vet the relaunches.
but you could...
Because it's like one creator can create multiple projects. That does not mean it's a relaunch.
Yeah. But that narrows down your...
But it narrows it down, same words in the title. But yes, I want to know the number that don't raise the amount they did before, like Alpha Colony, versus the number that do better than before, lowering help, all that. Yeah, I kind of want to know, like, hey, if you keep at it, do you make it? You know, do you find a way to make it?
And by how much?
Yeah, and by how much. That is it. Last news story up is first wave of Ouyo consoles coming out later this month. So,
Ouya.
Something is shipping. Something is shipping. The funny thing is like, you know, it's our $99 console, and like there's a $99 Wii now. You know, I don't know if you saw this or not.
I think the Wii is stripped down. Like it doesn't.
It is stripped down, but it's like real consoles are $99. You know, at this point, and the Wii is not going to have the hardware specs to beat even maybe a stripped down Wii. It's going to be interesting.
Certainly, and it sounds funny to say this about the Wii, given where it's gone. It's not going to have as much publisher support, I don't think. I think
it is a very tepid marketplace at the moment.
Yeah.
Publishers have really just ported their main stuff over, but the fact that it's running Unity is going to make it a very easy platform to promote.
Are you talking about the Wii or...
Wii U. I'm sorry, I was talking about Wii U, yeah.
Okay. Well, I was just talking about the Wii in general, not the Wii U, but...
yeah, so, well... So, I mean, they're dev kits. The Uyus that are launching now, they are dev kits. So, I mean, they're not going to be in the final shape and form. They will be...
Right.
Many times, dev kits are actually beige boxes, with similar hardware inside the box, but they're pretty much PC boxes, that launch, so... Those are going out this month, so something is happening. So, I think that wraps up the show this week. Thank you, everyone who tuned in to the live show. Thank you for everyone who watches this on YouTube, on the live stream, and everyone who downloads the audio podcast. We will be back in a week.
You've been listening to GameMarx. Visit us at GameMarx.com for the latest news, reviews, and videos on indie gaming. That's GameMarx.com.
You know, I really should set up a Twitch TV account under GameMarx, since I can't make the URL
change for different shows.
It just seems asinine that you have to do that. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, you should understand that people do shows, and that the name they want on it is not their name.
Yeah, one person might do multiple shows.
Yeah, and on top of that, it might have multiple shows, and you can't have that on Twitch. Not under one account. I didn't set up an iPhone. It just dies. Hey, you're muted, dude.
Powered by...
No, you're muted. Bad. Exciting podcast watching me. swirl my tea bag.
Do we actually have anyone in chat at this point?
No, but I think swirl my tea bag on the audio podcast will be great. Those on the video podcast know what that's describing, but the audio podcast was probably like, what?
I think it's kind of obvious what that's describing. You have to be intentionally trying to...
Teabagging does have a connotation in
I know.
a video game. Okay.
I know, but you have to be... It's not the obvious. It's not the obvious meaning.
Says who? Not to a 13-year-old boy.
I assume most people... Well, this may be a bad assumption, but I would assume that most people realize that the term teabagging comes from bags of tea.
Don't assume anything in this country.
Unless they just assume that tea just magically happens.
Well, you have to give a certain amount of credit to the Xbox Live community for taking that, teabagging. I mean, the act of dipping the tea, bag at the end of the tea. I mean, it's a very refined, cultured British thing. And being able to have that reference to apply it to Halo.
It's got to become the crudest thing possible.
There's a certain amount of respect there, is all I'm saying. You gotta well, at least they,
I don't know, is a tea bag that refined? Like, if you're going to be, like, super hipster about your tea, you're going to use, like, loose
tea
leaf.
ball.
Yeah.
But you're still tea bagging.
Yeah, I mean, but...
Only it's not a bag. You're tea balling at that point.
and we live in the South.
Tea balling.
Sweet tea. Like that. It's classy, but slightly less classy than the British usage. Definitely more classy than the Xbox. There is a huge leap there, but it's not as obvious.
They use it as a refined aperitif. We use it as milk.
I'll have to put this in outtakes, I guess, if I say it now.
Okay.
Save it for the show. I'll save it for the show.
I was going to say, I don't know where you're going with this. So.
I don't either.